sun was barely creeping over the jagged peaks of the Arizona horizon, casting a faint golden glow across the sprawling 30 acres of my ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dust and sagebrush, the kind of morning that made you feel alive, grounded, free. My cattle dog, Rusty, was sprawled out on the porch, his ears twitching at the distant call of a hawk. Inside, the coffee pot gurgled, and I was just about to pour myself a mug when I heard it, a sharp, metallic clang from the direction of the front gate. Rusty's head snapped up and a low growl rumbled in his throat. I set the mug down, my gut telling me something wasn't right. I stepped outside, the gravel crunching under my boots, and squinted toward the gate about 100 yards off. 6 figures were there, strangers, moving with purpose. They weren't neighbors, not delivery guys, not even lost tourists who'd taken a wrong turn off the highway. These men were dressed like they meant business, black polo shirts, utility belts, walkie-talkies crackling. One of them, a stocky guy with a clipboard, was barking orders like he was running a military op. Another was wrestling with the gate's latch, and I saw the glint of bolt cutters in his hand. My heart kicked up a notch. This wasn't a social call. "Hey," I shouted, striding toward them, Rusty trotting at my side, his hackles raised. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" The lead guy, the one with the clipboard, turned to face me. He was maybe in his 40s, with a buzz cut and a smirk that screamed arrogance. His polo shirt had HOA enforcement printed in big white letters across the back, and I almost laughed at the absurdity. HOA? Out here? My ranch was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by desert and scrubland, the nearest neighbor a mile away. The idea of a homeowners association staking a claim on my land was as ridiculous as a coyote trying to herd cattle. "This is HOA property now," he bellowed, his voice carrying that fake authority people use when they're trying to bully their way through. "Comply or we'll use force." I blinked, stunned, my brain struggling to process the words. HOA property? My private ranch, bought with every penny I had 5 years ago, paid off in full, deed-locked in a safe inside the house? The same ranch where I'd raised goats, chickens, and 2 kids after my wife passed? These guys had to be joking. But the way they were moving, pushing through the gate, fanning out across my gravel driveway like they owned the place, told me they weren't here for laughs. "Hold on just a damn minute," I said, planting myself in their path. Rusty was barking now, full on, his teeth bared. "This is my land. You can't just barge in here." "Who the hell are you?" The leader didn't even flinch. He shoved a laminated sheet of paper in my face, close enough that I had to step back to read it. The text was a jumble of legal jargon, something about unapproved fencing and unauthorized livestock volume. It had a logo at the top, Crimson Hills Homeowners Association, which made my blood boil. Crimson Hills was a gated community 15 miles away, a place full of McMansions, golf carts, and people who wouldn't know a shovel from a salad fork. They had no jurisdiction here, no claim, no nothing. "Are you kidding me?" I said, my voice rising. "This is private property. I've got the deed, county records, everything. You're trespassing." The guy's smirk widened, like he'd heard it all before. "You're in violation," he said, tapping the clipboard. "This land falls under Crimson Hills expanded zoning. You either comply or we start seizing assets." "Seizing assets?" My fists clenched. This was my home, my sanctuary, the place I'd built for my kids after the world took their mother. I wasn't about to let some wannabe rent-a-cops in polo shirts tell me it wasn't mine. But before I could say another word, one of the other men, a lanky guy with a utility belt that looked like it weighed more than he did, strode toward my barn. He grabbed the double doors and yanked, hard, like he had every right to go poking around in there. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," I shouted, jogging after him. "Get away from there. That's private property." He ignored me, tugging at the padlock. That's when I lost it. I don't yell much. Years as a Marine taught me to keep my cool, but this was different. These strangers were on my land, touching my stuff, acting like they owned the place. I spun toward the house, my voice booming across the yard. Grant, get out here now. Grant, my 22-year-old son, was inside, probably still cooling down from his morning workout. He's a quiet kid, always has been. Doesn't talk unless he has to, doesn't brag, doesn't waste energy on nonsense. But everyone in town knows he's a blue belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, training every day like it's his religion. I heard the screen door creak open, and there he was, stepping onto the porch barefoot, wiping his hands on a towel. His t-shirt was damp with sweat, his dark hair sticking to his forehead. He took one look at the scene, 6 strangers, me yelling, Rusty going nuts, and his eyes went cold. Not angry, not scared. Just cold, like a predator sizing up prey. Who are these guys? He asked, his voice low, steady. They're claiming the ranch belongs to some HOA, I said, not taking my eyes off the leader. They're trying to break into the barn. Grant set the towel down on the porch railing, slow and deliberate, like he was setting aside everything that wasn't about to happen. He stepped off the porch, his bare feet silent on the gravel, and walked toward the group. The air shifted, like the calm before a storm. The men noticed him now, their heads turning, their chatter dying down. Grant's not a big guy, lean, maybe 5 feet 10 inches, but there's something about the way he moves, like every step is calculated, every muscle ready to spring. You've got 10 seconds to leave, he said, stopping about 10 feet from the group. His voice was calm, almost polite, but it carried a weight that made the hair on my neck stand up. The lanky guy by the barn laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. He took a step toward Grant, cracking his knuckles like he was in some bad action movie. You gonna make us, kid? He said, grinning. Big mistake. I don't know if it was the laugh, the step, or the fact that this guy thought he could intimidate my son, but it flipped a switch. Grant moved so fast it was like watching a snake strike. 1 second, the guy was standing there, all bravado and bad decisions. The next, he was face down in the dirt, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that made me wince. He screamed, a high-pitched yelp that echoed across the yard. Grant didn't say a word, just held him there, his knee pressed into the guy's spine. Another man, this one bulkier, with a walkie-talkie dangling from his belt, rushed forward, probably thinking he could overpower Grant with size. Another mistake. Grant released the first guy, sidestepped the second, and in one fluid motion, grabbed his arm, twisted, and flipped him midair. The man hit the ground with a thud that shook the gravel, his breath whooshing out in a groan. Before anyone could blink, a third guy tried his luck, lunging at Grant with a wild swing. Grant ducked, hooked the guy's leg, and sent him sprawling into the dirt beside his buddies. The whole thing took maybe 10 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. 3 men were writhing on the ground, clutching arms or ribs, groaning in pain. The other 3, including the clipboard guy, stood frozen, their mouths hanging open like they'd just seen a ghost. Rusty was still barking, circling the scene like he was ready to jump in if needed. I was rooted to the spot, my heart pounding, torn between pride and disbelief. I'd seen Grant train, seen him spar, but this was different. This was real, and he'd just taken down 3 grown men like they were nothing. That's when I saw it. One of the remaining guys, a short, wiry one with a nervous twitch, reached for something on his belt. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a gun, but it looked like a baton or maybe a taser, the kind of thing that could do real damage. My mouth opened to yell, to warn Grant, but I wasn't fast enough. The guy's hand closed around the handle, and he started to pull it free. Grant, I shouted, my voice cracking. But Grant was already moving. He'd seen it too, his eyes locked on the guy's hand. In a blur, he closed the distance, sidestepped the baton as it came free, and grabbed the man's wrist. With a twist, he forced the guy's arm behind his back, sweeping his legs out from under him in one smooth motion. The baton clattered to the ground, and the man hit the dirt with a yelp, his face pressed into the gravel. Grant stood over him, breathing steady, not a drop of sweat on his brow. Last chance, Grant said, his voice still calm but now with an edge that made even me shiver. "Get off our land." The clipboard guy, who'd been silent through the whole thing, finally found his voice. He took a step back, his smirk gone, replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice shaking just enough to betray him. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. The HOA owns this zone now. You're in violation, and we'll be back." I stormed forward, my patience long gone. "You've got no authority here," I snapped. "This land's been in private ownership since 1923. I've got the deed, the county records, everything. You're the ones breaking the law, trespassing, harassment, assault. Take one more step, and I'm calling the sheriff, the state police, and every news crew within 100 miles. The guy's face went pale, his eyes darting to his groaning buddies on the ground, then to Grant, who was still standing like a statue, ready to move if anyone twitched. He muttered something under his breath, probably cursing his bad luck, and raised a hand to the remaining two men. "Let's go," he said, backing toward the gate. "This isn't over." They retreated, dragging their injured friends with them. One guy was limping, another clutching his shoulder, and the wiry one was still rubbing his wrist where Grant had twisted it. They piled into a black SUV parked just outside the gate, the engine roaring to life as they peeled out, kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air long after they were gone. I stood there, my heart still racing, watching the dust settle. Grant picked up the towel he'd left on the porch and wiped his hands, like he'd just finished a chore. Rusty finally stopped barking, trotting over to nudge Grant's leg as if to say, "Nice work." I looked at my son, trying to find words, but all I could manage was, "You okay?" He nodded, his face unreadable. "They'll be back," he said, not as a question, but as a fact. "Yeah," I said, my voice quieter now. "I know." We didn't say much after that, just stood there, taking in the silence of the ranch. The sun was higher now, the golden light spilling over the fields, the barn, the house, everything that was ours, everything we'd fought for. But the weight of what had just happened hung heavy. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or a mix-up. These people, whoever they were, had come prepared, with papers, weapons, and a plan. They'd come to take what wasn't theirs, and they'd underestimated us. Big time. Inside, my daughter Maddie was waiting, her eyes wide as she peeked out from the kitchen window. She'd seen the whole thing, probably heard it too. "Dad, what was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. I put an arm around her, pulling her close. "That, sweetheart, was a bunch of idiots who thought they could scare us off our land." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Maddie was 16, tough in her own way, but this was new territory for all of us. I glanced at Grant, who was pouring himself a glass of water, his movements calm, deliberate. He didn't look worried, but I knew him well enough to know he was already thinking 3 steps ahead, planning for whatever came next. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the security footage from the cameras Grant had installed a few weeks back. The whole thing was there, every word, every move, every second of Grant taking those guys apart. I saved the file, sent a copy to my email, and started typing a report for the sheriff. Whatever this Crimson Hills HOA was, they weren't just a nuisance. They were a threat, and I wasn't about to let them waltz back in here without a fight. As I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light streaming through the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The HOA had come screaming about orders, but they'd met my son, a quiet kid with a black belt and a backbone of steel. They'd learned their lesson the hard way, but something told me they wouldn't stop. Not yet. And when they came back, we'd be ready. Because this was our land, our home, and no one, not a fake HOA, not a clipboard-waving bully, not anyone was going to take it from us. The coffee was cold now, but I didn't care. I took a sip anyway, staring out at the ranch, the place I'd built for my family, the place I'd die defending if I had to. And with Grant by my side, I knew we had a fighting chance. Hell, we had more than a chance. We had a legacy. and no one was going to mess with that. The dust from the HOA's retreat still lingered in the air, a gritty reminder of the morning's chaos. I stood on the porch, my hands gripping the railing, watching the horizon where their black SUV had vanished. The ranch was quiet again, save for Rusty's occasional huff as he patrolled the yard, sniffing the spots where those fake enforcers had sprawled in the dirt. Inside, Grant was cleaning up, his movements methodical, like he was resetting after a sparring session. Maddie was at the kitchen table, sketching furiously in her notebook, probably trying to process what she'd seen. I took a deep breath, the scent of sagebrush and freedom filling my lungs, but the knot in my gut wouldn't loosen. Those guys would be back. I knew it, and I wasn't about to let them catch us off guard again. Let me take you back to how this whole mess started, because it didn't begin with 6 goons storming my gate. It began 5 years ago, when I made the hardest decision of my life. My wife, Sarah, had passed away after a brutal fight with cancer, leaving me and our 2 kids, Grant and Maddie, drowning in grief. The city we lived in, Phoenix, was suffocating. Every street corner held a memory of her. The coffee shop where we'd met, the park where we'd pushed Maddie's stroller, the hospital where we'd said goodbye. The noise, the traffic, the endless grind. It was too much. I couldn't raise my kids in a place that felt like a graveyard. So I sold everything. The house, the furniture, the fancy car I'd bought to impress clients. I cashed out my savings, every last dime, and bought this ranch, 30 acres of raw, untamed Arizona desert, far from the hustle, far from the pain. The first time I saw this place, it felt like a promise. The land stretched out wide and open, framed by rugged hills and a sky so big it could swallow your sorrow. There was an old farmhouse, weathered but sturdy, a barn that needed some love and enough space to breathe. No neighbors breathing down your neck, no HOA telling you how to mow your lawn, no rules except the ones you made yourself. That was the point. After years of following orders in the Marines and playing by society's rules, I wanted freedom. For me, for Grant, for Maddie. This ranch was our fresh start, our sanctuary, and I'd be damned if anyone took it away. We moved in during the spring, the kids still raw from losing their mom. Grant was 17 then, quiet even back then, but he threw himself into helping me fix the place up. We rebuilt the barn, patched the roof, and set up solar panels to keep us off the grid. Maddie, only 11, turned the old tool shed into her art studio, painting murals on the walls, bright, swirling colors that made you smile even on the hard days. We got a few goats, a handful of chickens, and 2 horses, Dusty and Blaze, who became Maddie's best friends. I planted a vegetable garden, nothing fancy, just enough to keep us fed. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. The community around here was small but solid. Mostly farmers, ranchers, and veterans like me, people who valued privacy and hard work. We'd nod at each other in town, swap stories at the feed store, maybe share a beer at the VFW hall on weekends. No one cared about your fence height or your paint colors. That was the beauty of it. When I bought the ranch, I checked the deed 3 times, had a lawyer go over every word. No HOA, no covenants, no restrictions. Just pure, unfiltered ownership, backed by county records and a handshake from the old man who'd sold it to me. This was our land, free and clear, and I thought that's how it would stay. But 2 months ago, something changed. It started with a letter, taped to my mailbox, no stamp, no return address, just a plain white sheet of paper with typed text, due to changes in jurisdiction and zoning. Your property is now under the supervision of the Crimson Hills Homeowners Association. Compliance is mandatory. I laughed when I read it, crumpled it up, and tossed it in the trash. Crimson Hills was a gated community 15 miles away, a world of manicured lawns, white fences, and people who probably paid someone to dust their golf carts. They had nothing to do with us. My ranch wasn't part of their fancy subdivision, and their jurisdiction was a joke. I figured it was a prank, maybe some bored rich kid's idea of fun. A week later, another letter showed up, this one more insistent, claiming my barn was an unauthorized structure and my chickens were a biohazard. It demanded I pay a $500 fine for noncompliance and threatened daily penalties if I didn't submit to an inspection. I tore it up, but the knot in my gut started to form. This wasn't a prank anymore. Someone was trying to pull something, and they weren't giving up. The letters kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last. Fines for excessive dust, $250 a day. Violations for unapproved livestock volume. Demands to repaint my house in community-approved colors. It was absurd, like they were making it up as they went along. I ignored every single one, but they didn't stop. Then, they showed up in person. The first visit was about a month ago, just two guys in a golf cart, wearing khakis and polo shirts with that same Crimson Hills HOA logo. I was out by the barn, fixing a fence post, when they pulled up to the gate. I thought they were lost until one of them, a guy with a comb-over and a clipboard, called out, "Mr. Carter, you're in violation of HOA regulations. We need to inspect your property." I set my hammer down and walked over, keeping the gate between us. "You're on the wrong land," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is private property, not part of your community. Get lost." Comb-over smirked, like he'd expected resistance. "You'll want to cooperate," he said. "We have authority over this zone now. Noncompliance comes with consequences." "Consequences?" I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him. "You're trespassing. I've got a deed, a lawyer, and a shotgun that says you've got no authority here. Want to test that?" His smirk faltered, and the other guy, a younger one with a nervous twitch, tugged at his sleeve. They muttered something to each other, climbed back into their golf cart, and drove off. But that smirk, that smug little twist of his lips, stuck with me. It wasn't the look of someone who was done. It was the look of someone who was just getting started. I told Grant about it that night over dinner. He was eating quietly, as usual, his fork moving with the same precision he used in his jiu-jitsu drills. "They're not gonna stop," he said, not looking up from his plate. "I know," I said. "But they've got nothing on us. The deed's clean, the county's on our side. They're just blowing smoke." He nodded, but his jaw tightened. Grant doesn't say much, but he sees everything. The next day, he started installing security cameras around the ranch, 4 of them, covering the gate, the driveway, the barn, and the back pasture. He rigged them to a hard drive in the house, with motion sensors and night vision. "Just in case," he said when I asked. He also reinforced the gate with a heavier chain and a new padlock, the kind you'd need a blowtorch to cut through. I didn't argue. After 20 years in the Marines, I knew better than to ignore a gut feeling, and Grant's instincts were as sharp as mine. Maddie, on the other hand, was more curious than worried. "Why do they care about our chickens?" she asked one morning, feeding the hens while I checked the garden. "They're not hurting anybody." "They don't care about the chickens," I said, pulling a weed from the tomato patch. "They want control. Some people can't stand it when you don't bow down to them." She frowned, her paint-splattered overalls catching the sunlight. "That's dumb." "Yeah," I said, smiling despite myself. "It is. But dumb or not, it was real." The letters kept coming, piling up in a drawer I started calling the bullshit bin. Notices of fines, threats of legal action, claims that my solar panels were non-compliant, and my garden was a zoning violation. One even demanded I remove the flagpole in the front yard because it was excessive in height. I'd laugh if it weren't so infuriating. I called the sheriff's office just to cover my bases and spoke to Sheriff Burke, a guy I'd known since we moved here. He'd been to the ranch a few times, knew I kept everything legal. "Paul, I don't know what these clowns are up to," he said over the phone. "Your deed's solid, and there's no HOA registered for your parcel. Sounds like someone's trying to scam you. Send me the letters, and I'll look into it." I sent him copies, but I didn't hold my breath. Burke was a good guy, but the county was understaffed, and this wasn't exactly a murder case. Still, I felt better knowing someone in uniform had my back. What I didn't expect was how fast things would escalate. About 3 weeks ago, I got a certified letter, the kind you have to sign for. It was thicker than the others, with a fancy header from Crimson Hills Homeowners Association and a multi-page document inside. It claimed my land had been annexed into their jurisdiction under some municipal code I'd never heard of. There were maps, badly drawn ones, showing my ranch as part of their expansion zone. They demanded I pay $10,000 in back dues and submit to a full property audit within 30 days, or they'd file for seizure. Seizure. The word hit me like a punch to the chest. These people weren't just harassing me, they were trying to steal my home. I drove into town the next day and showed the letter to Mr. Callahan, a retired property lawyer who'd helped me when I bought the ranch. He was in his 70s, sharp as a tack, with an office full of law books and a no-nonsense attitude. He took one look at the letter, snorted, and tossed it on his desk. "This is a land grab," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Pure and simple. They're using fake regulations to scare you into signing over rights. HOAs pull this crap all the time, but this is next level. Those maps? Fabricated. That code? Doesn't exist. You've got a clean deed, Paul. They've got nothing. Can I sue?" I asked, my voice tight. "Oh, you can," he said, his eyes glinting. "And you should. But it'll take time, and they're counting on you to blink first. My advice? Don't engage, but don't ignore them either. Document everything, letters, visits, anything. And be ready. These types don't back off easy." I left his office with a plan. Keep records, stay vigilant, and don't let these bastards push me around. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than a few letters and a golf cart. Whoever was behind this had resources, organization, and a hell of a lot of nerve. I told Grant and Maddie to stay alert, and we started locking the barn and chicken coop at night, something we'd never bothered with before. Rusty took to sleeping by the front door, his ears perked even in his dreams. Then, about a week before the big confrontation, something else happened. I was out checking the back fence line when I saw a white pickup truck parked just beyond my property, maybe 100 yards off. 2 guys were inside, just sitting there, watching. Not moving, not working, just staring. I waved, thinking maybe they were hunters or surveyors. They didn't wave back. They just sat there for another 10 minutes, then drove off. It wasn't illegal, but it was creepy as hell. I told Grant, and he added another camera to cover that side of the ranch. "They're scoping us out," he said, his voice flat. I didn't argue. The night before the HOA stormed in, I couldn't sleep. I sat up late, going over the letters again, looking for patterns, anything that might tell me who these people were. The more I read, the angrier I got. These weren't just threats, they were personal. They mentioned my barn, my chickens, even Maddie's art studio, like they'd been watching us for months. I started to wonder if that pickup truck wasn't the first time they'd been out here. The thought made my skin crawl. At around 3 a.m., I heard a noise outside, a low hum, like a motor. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch, Rusty at my heels. The sound was coming from above, faint but unmistakable. I shone the light into the sky and caught a glimpse of something small and black, hovering over the barn. A drone, not one of ours. It darted away before I could get a good look, disappearing into the night. I stood there, my heart pounding, realizing this wasn't just about letters anymore. They were spying on us, gathering intel, planning something big. The next morning, I was up before dawn, checking the cameras, looking for any sign of that drone. The footage was grainy, but it was there, small, fast, with a blinking blue light. I saved the clip and sent it to Sheriff Burke, along with a note. "These guys are escalating. I need help." He called me back an hour later, sounding tired. "Paul, I'm looking into it," he said. "But I've got to be honest. Someone's filing complaints about you. Noise violations, fencing issues, even something about improper animal permits. It's coming through a legal channel tied to this HOA. They've got lawyers, and they're pushing hard." Complaints? I nearly dropped the phone. Burke, you've been to my ranch. You know I'm legal. What the hell's going on? I know, he said. But they're playing dirty. I'm trying to sort it out, but you need to watch your back. These guys aren't just amateurs. That call shook me. If they were filing fake complaints, they weren't just trying to scare me. They were building a case, stacking the deck to make it look like I was the problem. I told Grant and Maddie over breakfast, keeping my voice calm so I wouldn't spook them. Maddie's eyes got wide, but Grant just nodded, like he'd expected it. They're trying to wear us down, he said, sipping his coffee. Make us slip up. Then we don't slip up, I said. We stay sharp, we document everything, and we don't give them an inch. That's when I heard the bang at the gate, the sound that started it all. I looked out the window and saw them, 6 men, dressed like a SWAT team, one holding bolt cutters. My blood ran cold. This wasn't a letter or a golf cart. This was an invasion. I grabbed my phone, started recording, and stepped outside, ready to confront them. And that's what led to Grant standing in the gravel, bare feet steady, staring down a group of men who thought they could take what was ours. Looking back, those first few months of harassment were just the opening act. The letters, the visits, the drone they were testing us, seeing how far they could push before we pushed back. They didn't expect a fight, didn't expect Grant's skills, didn't expect a family that wouldn't bend. But they'd learn. Oh, they'd learn. Because this wasn't just about a ranch. This was about everything we'd built, everything we'd lost, everything we stood for. And no one, not Crimson Hills, not their fake lawyers, not their hired muscle, was going to take it away. Not while we were still standing. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in streaks of orange and purple when the HOA made their boldest move yet. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, the clink of plates mixing with Maddie's soft humming as she sketched at the table. Grant was outside, running through his jiu-jitsu drills in the yard, his shadow moving like a dancer in the fading light. Rusty, our cattle dog, was sprawled by the door, his ears twitching at every sound. It had been a tense few days since the first confrontation when Grant had sent 6 HOA enforcers limping back to their SUV. We'd fortified the ranch, extra locks, more cameras, drones of our own, but the air felt heavy, like a storm was brewing. And then it hit, not with a knock, but with a blackout. The lights flickered once, twice, then went dead. The hum of the refrigerator stopped, and the security monitor in the corner blinked out. Maddie gasped, her pencil freezing mid-stroke. "Dad, what's happening?" she asked, her voice tight. I grabbed a flashlight from the counter, my pulse already climbing. "Stay here," I said, heading for the door. Rusty was on his feet, growling low, his eyes locked on the darkness outside. I flipped on the flashlight and stepped onto the porch, the beam cutting through the night. The ranch was eerily silent, no crickets, no wind, just the crunch of my boots on the gravel. Then I saw it on the battery-powered security monitor we'd rigged up after the last incident. 2 black SUVs creeping up the dirt path to our gate. No headlights, no noise, just shadows moving with purpose. And the men stepping out weren't carrying clipboards this time. They had batons, flashlights, and something that glinted in the moonlight, tasers. "Grant," I shouted, my voice echoing across the yard. He was already halfway to the house, his shirt off, sweat glistening on his skin from training. He took one look at my face and knew. "They're back," I said, pointing to the monitor. "And they're not playing around." Grant's eyes narrowed, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed a water bottle from the porch, took a quick swig, and headed for the front yard, barefoot as always, his movements calm but deliberate. I turned to Maddie, who was peeking out the window, her face pale. "Stay inside," I told her. "Hit the panic button if things go south." She nodded, clutching her sketchbook like a shield, and darted to the living room where we'd installed the alarm. I grabbed the old shotgun from the rack by the door, not loaded to kill, just burst-shot rounds to make a point. I wasn't planning to shoot anyone, but I'd be damned if I let these bastards think they could roll over us with intimidation. This was our land, our home, and they were about to learn what happened when you trespassed on a Carter's property. Outside, the air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle. Grant was already in the middle of the front yard, standing tall, his shoulders relaxed, but his eyes locked on the gate. 8 men were there now, all in black, no reflective HOA badges, no fake uniforms, just tactical gear that screamed hired muscle. One of them, a tall guy with a megaphone, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Paul Carter," he shouted. "This property is under home management by order of Zoning Code 591A. Stand down, or we will enforce entry." I muttered under my breath, "Enforce entry? They've lost their minds." I stepped off the porch, shotgun in hand, and stood beside Grant. "You're trespassing on private land." I yelled back, "You've got 10 seconds to leave, or I'm calling the state police." The leader didn't flinch, but one of his men, a stocky guy with a bolt cutter, moved toward the gate. That's when Grant sprang into action. He vaulted the fence like it was nothing, hit the ground running, and tackled the bolt cutter guy with a force that sent the tool flying. The man hit the dirt with a crack, his breath whooshing out. Before the others could react, another charged, swinging a baton. Grant ducked low, swept the guy's legs, and twisted behind him, using his own momentum to flip him into a roll. The man screamed, clutching his shoulder as he landed. It was chaos, but Grant was in his element. 3 more rushed him, thinking numbers would win. They were wrong. He moved like water, elbows, hooks, foot sweeps, takedowns. One guy grabbed his arm. Grant rolled, pulled him down, and locked his arm until he begged for mercy. Another swung wildly. Grant sidestepped, caught the baton mid-swing, and twisted it free, sending the guy sprawling. I stood there, shotgun raised but unfired, shouting, "You're done. Get off my land." One of the men, breathing hard, held up his hands and backed away. But the leader, older and bigger, pulled out his phone and started filming. "This is all legal," he barked. "You're resisting HOA enforcement. We'll have you arrested. You broke into my land at night with weapons." I snapped. "That's criminal trespassing and assault." He didn't answer, just muttered something to his men. A few helped their injured buddies off the ground, one limping, another holding his side. Then, the strangest thing, they left. No argument, no threats, just climbed into their SUVs and peeled out, leaving a cloud of dust and a mangled gate behind. I stood there, my heart pounding, watching their taillights fade. Grant wiped his hands on his shorts, his breathing steady, like he'd just finished a workout. Maddie peeked out from the house, her eyes wide. "Are they gone?" she asked. "For now," I said, my voice grim. "But they'll be back. We didn't sleep that night." Maddie stayed up with me and Grant at the kitchen table, the battery-powered lantern casting shadows on the walls. We watched the security footage over and over, documenting every move, every face, every license plate. I called Sheriff Burke, left a voicemail, and sent him the video. Then I texted Marisa Blackwell, our lawyer, with a link to the footage. "This is war," I wrote. She called back within the hour, her voice sharp. "Paul, this isn't just an HOA issue anymore," she said. "This is organized harassment, possibly racketeering. I'm drafting a restraining order and sending everything to the district attorney. Keep recording, and don't engage unless you have to." "Too late for that," I said, glancing at Grant. "They brought tasers and batons." She sighed. "Then we'll make them regret it. Stay safe." The next morning, I found our mailbox torn off its post, lying in the ditch like a warning. Maddie cried over breakfast, her hands shaking as she stirred her cereal. Why are they doing this to us? We didn't do anything wrong. Grant looked at her, his voice steady. Because we didn't roll over when they told us to. I put a hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart, some people think money and fake power give them the right to control everything. But we've got something they don't, character. And sometimes the right thing is to stand up, even when it's hard." She nodded, wiping her eyes, and went back to her sketchbook, drawing a sign that read, Trespassing equals prison. I smiled, proud of her fire, but the weight of it all was crushing me. These weren't just bullies, they were a machine, backed by lawyers, money, and a plan to steal our home. I spent the day fortifying the ranch, extra locks on the barn, motion sensor lights, bigger signs. Grant wired our drones to our phones, so any movement would trigger an alert. Maddie painted more warnings, her brush strokes bold and angry. That afternoon, I drove to town to meet Mr. Callahan again. He was sipping coffee in his cluttered office, the same one where he'd called the HOA's letters a land grab. I showed him the footage, the letters, the fake zoning maps. He leaned back, his eyes narrowing. "They're escalating because you didn't cave," he said. "This isn't about chickens or fences. They want your land, probably for some developer with deep pockets. Crimson Hills is just the front. You need to hit them hard, legally, before they bury you in paperwork." "I've got a lawyer," I said. "Marissa Blackwell. She's filing a restraining order." "Good," he said. "But don't stop there. Get the community involved. These types hate publicity. Shine a light on their bullshit, and they'll scatter like roaches." I left his office with a fire in my chest. He was right, we couldn't just defend. We had to attack. But before I could plan anything, the HOA struck again. That night, just after midnight, the front gate exploded. Not a figure of speech. Actual sparks, metal hinges ripping clean off, the boom echoing like a gunshot. I grabbed the shotgun and rushed outside, my heart in my throat. Grant was already there, sprinting into the chaos, as 10 men in helmets and tactical vests poured through the breach. They had pepper spray, batons, and, worst of all, dogs. 2 snarling German shepherds, teeth flashing, charging straight for Grant. Most people would have frozen or run. Not Grant. He dropped low, rolled to the side, and grabbed a wooden stick from the firewood pile, not to hit, but to control. As the first dog leapt, he angled the stick like a barrier, redirecting the dog's momentum. It tumbled harmlessly onto the gravel. The second circled, growling, but I didn't give it a chance. I fired a single birdshot round into the air boom, the sound splitting the night. The dogs backed off, tails down, startled. The men froze, their flashlights swinging toward me. "This is your final warning," I bellowed, shotgun steady. "You're trespassing at night with explosives, animals, and force. I've got every second of this on camera." The leader, a tall man with a smirk that made my blood boil, stepped forward. "You think you're clever, old man," he said. "The HOA owns everything from this fence to the creek bed. You're squatting on regulated land. Show me the deed," I challenged. "I've got mine, county stamped, registered." "You got one." He didn't answer, just raised a hand, and his men advanced. Grant planted himself between them and the house. 2 came at him from the left. He dodged one, grabbed the second by the collar, and slammed him into the fence post, dropping him like a sack of feed. Another swung a baton. Grant caught it mid-swing, twisted it free, and sent the guy sprawling. "You're outnumbered," someone shouted. "You're outskilled," Grant shot back, his voice cold. Inside, Maddie hit the panic button. A piercing alarm wailed across the ranch, loud enough to wake the dead. The attackers hesitated, and that's when the cavalry arrived, sort of. Headlights blazed down the road, and Dan Jenkins, our neighbor, pulled up in his dusty Ford truck, rifle on the dashboard. "You've got 5 seconds to get the hell off this man's property," he shouted, stepping out. "Mess with one of us, you mess with all of us." Another truck pulled up, then another. Word had spread fast, ranchers, farmers, veterans, all standing with us. The invaders realized they were outmatched. They scattered, running to their SUVs, one guy limping, another dazed. The leader turned back, pointing at me. "This isn't over," he said. "You'll see." Then they were gone, leaving a wrecked gate and burn marks from their flashbang. Dan clapped Grant on the back. "Your boy's a damn superhero." I hugged Grant, my heart racing. "I thought they were gonna hurt you," I whispered. "They tried," he said. "They failed." We turned off the alarm, let the dogs sniff the wreckage, and sat down to regroup. The community support changed everything. Dan and the others weren't just neighbors, they were allies, ready to fight with us. We weren't alone anymore. But the HOA wasn't done, and we knew it. They'd come with dogs, explosives, and lies, but we'd met them with courage, cameras, and a community that wouldn't back down. The war was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like we could win. Because this wasn't just our ranch, it was a stand for everyone who'd ever been bullied by greed dressed up as authority. And we were just getting started. The morning after the community stood with us against the Crimson Hills HOA's demolition crew, the ranch felt different. The air was lighter, like the desert had exhaled after holding its breath for months. The mangled gate still hung crooked, a jagged reminder of the fight, but the sun rose anyway, casting a warm glow over the fields, the barn, and the house we'd defended with everything we had. I stood on the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching Grant run through his jiu-jitsu drills in the yard, his movements fluid and deliberate. Maddie was nearby, painting a new sign for the gate. Carter Ranch, family, freedom, forever. Rusty, our cattle dog, sprawled in the dirt, his tail thumping lazily. We'd won a battle, but the war wasn't over. Not yet. The HOA's lawsuit was looming, and I knew people like Harold Finch didn't slink away quietly. But for the first time in months, I felt something stronger than fear, a hope. The courtroom in town was a far cry from the open desert. It smelled of old coffee, worn leather, and bureaucracy, the kind of place where dreams could be crushed under stacks of paperwork. I sat beside Grant in a blue suit I hadn't worn since Sarah's funeral, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar. Maddie was behind us, her sketchbook open, drawing the scene like it was one of her murals. Across the aisle, the Crimson Hills HOA team looked like they'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom, tailored suits, polished shoes, and smug smiles. Harold Finch, their big-shot lawyer, sat at the center, flipping through a thick folder with a confidence that made my skin crawl. When he caught me watching, he flashed a smirk, like he already had us beat. I glanced at Grant. His face was calm, focused, like he was stepping onto a jiu-jitsu mat. He wasn't here to play games. Neither was I. Our lawyer, Marissa Blackwell, was a force of nature, tall, sharp, with an energy that filled the room. She'd taken our case with a fire in her eyes, like she lived for dismantling crooked HOAs. The judge, an older woman with a no-nonsense stare, called the room to order, and the trial began. It wasn't a criminal case, not yet, but a civil suit that could set the stage for property seizure, crippling fines, or worse. The HOA's goal was clear: bankrupt us, scare us, force us off our land. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Finch opened with a speech that dripped with fake sincerity. "Ladies and gentlemen of the court," he said, pacing like a TV lawyer, "we're here because of a violent, dangerous homeowner who attacked community officials trying to maintain order. The HOA exists to protect standards, but Paul Carter and his son, Grant, have chosen chaos over compliance, assaulting our officers and defying fair regulations." I nearly laughed out loud. Assaulting? Defying? They'd broken into our home, waved batons and tasers, and sent dogs after us. But Finch was slick, showing edited video clips that made it look like Grant struck first, short, out-of-context flashes that hid the bolt cutters, the explosives, the trespassing. The jurors leaned forward, some nodding, and my stomach twisted. They were buying it. Then it was Marissa's turn. She stood slowly, her heels clicking on the floor, and plugged a flash drive into the courtroom's computer. "I'd like to present the unedited security footage," she said, her voice calm but commanding. The screen lit up, and the room went silent. We watched the HOA's men break our gate, surround Grant, swing batons, unleash dogs, set off flashbangs. We saw Grant defending, not attacking, his movements precise and controlled. We saw me, shotgun raised, shouting warnings, not threats. By the time the video ended, a juror whispered, Wow, and the air had shifted. Marissa let the silence hang, then spoke. The Carter family has lived on their ranch for 5 years, legally, peacefully, she said. The HOA's claim to their land is based on forged documents and a fake zoning map. They were never part of Crimson Hills, never agreed to be. This isn't about community safety. It's about intimidation, harassment, and an attempted land grab. The judge nodded, her pen scratching notes. Finch's smirk was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped scowl. During the recess, he cornered me outside the courtroom, his voice low. You may have stalled, Carter, but the HO isn't going away. I met his gaze, unflinching. Neither are we. That evening, Marissa called with news that felt like a punch and a victory at once. We won the first round, she said. The judge threw out the civil suit. Clear self-defense, illegal entry. But they're filing another claim, going after your property title, trying to get the county to nullify it. My stomach turned. This isn't a legal battle anymore, I said. It's war. Damn right, she said. And we're going to win. Back at the ranch, we didn't celebrate, we prepared. Grant trained harder, not just for himself, but for what he wanted to become. One morning, as I sipped coffee on the porch, he walked up, his face serious. I want to teach, he said. Teach? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Jiu-jitsu, self-defense, he said. Not just the moves, how to stay calm, how to protect what's yours without hate. What we went through, others need to know how to fight back. I sat back, letting his words sink in. Grant wasn't just a fighter anymore. He was a leader, a protector. We cleared out the old storage shed, painted it, laid down mats, and hung posters of courage and resilience. Maddie made the sign, Carter Ranch Defense Academy, strength without violence. The community showed up, farmers, teens, even elderly couples, all wanting to learn. Grant taught them takedowns, balance, how to read a threat, and when to walk away. Watching him, I saw Sarah in his steady hands, his quiet strength, and my heart swelled with pride. The story of our fight spread like wildfire. A local news station ran a piece, calling it the HOA that picked the wrong ranch. A podcast picked it up, then national outlets. Letters poured in from across the country, people sharing their own HOA horror stories. One night, a veteran showed up at our door, his voice heavy. I saw your footage, he said. My HOA took my home in Texas last year. I didn't fight back. But you showed me I should have stood taller. We invited him in for dinner, and that's when it hit me, we weren't just survivors. We were a symbol, a beacon for anyone who'd been bullied by greed dressed as authority. But there was one last hurdle, the land itself. The county zoning map still showed an expansion zone cutting across our back 5 acres, a crack in our armor that could let the HOA slither back. Marissa dug deeper, uncovering a shell company tied to Harold Finch's law firm, the one behind the zoning push. She presented it to the state land commissioner, and 3 weeks later, I got the letter that changed everything. Zoning Code 44F request officially revoked, it read. Expansion plans denied. Full ownership restored to Paul Carter and family under protected private property clause. I framed that letter and nailed it to the barn wall, right next to Maddie's mural. We celebrated that night, not just as a family but as a community. Grills smoked, horses grazed, and families danced under the stars. Grant stood on a hay bale, giving his first real speech. When they came for our land, we could have fought with hate, he said, his voice steady. But we chose truth. We chose community. And that's why we're still here. This isn't just our ranch. It's a reminder that right still matters. The crowd clapped, some cried, and I felt my heart grow 3 sizes. Sheriff Burke pulled me aside, his face tired but warm. Paul, you've got a reputation now. Folks trust you. Ever thought of running for office? I laughed. Me? A politician. Not a politician, he said. A protector. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. The idea stuck with me, a seed planted in the dirt of everything we'd been through. We weren't just defending a ranch anymore. We were part of something bigger, a stand against silent takeovers and intimidation dressed as policy. The next morning, I watched the sunrise with Grant and Maddie, the hills glowing gold, our land secure. Maddie leaned her head on my shoulder. Dad, do they think they'll ever try again? I looked across the ranch, our ranch, and smiled. Let them try. Because we were ready. Not just with cameras, drones, or Grant's jiu-jitsu, but with something stronger, a community that stood shoulder to shoulder, a truth that couldn't be buried, and a family that wouldn't break. The HOA had come screaming orders, but they'd met my son, a quiet warrior who taught them a lesson no rulebook could hold. They'd met me, a father who'd fight to his last breath for his kids. And they'd met our neighbors, ordinary people who proved that right still matters when you stand together. Weeks later, Crimson Hill's HOA collapsed under the weight of its own lies. Marissa's countersuit, charging trespassing, property damage, harassment, and unlawful impersonation, hit them hard. The state launched an audit, uncovering forged maps, unlicensed drones, and hired muscle posing as officers. Class action lawsuits piled up, and Harold Finch's name started appearing in headlines, his reputation crumbling. Our ranch stood tall, a testament to what happens when you don't bow to bullies. And Grant? He kept teaching, his academy growing, his lessons reaching beyond the mat. Maddie painted murals that told our story, each stroke a defiance of fear. Me? I kept the coffee pot on, the shotgun loaded, and my eyes on the horizon, knowing we'd built something no one could take away. This wasn't just a victory, it was a legacy, a blazing reminder that freedom isn't given, it's fought for, defended, and passed down. So let the HOA come back. Let them try. They'll find a ranch, a family, and a community waiting, ready to show them what happens when you mess with the wrong damn people.